Welcome to Door to the Top Floor, the podcast where we're just trying to grow and get better every single day. I'd like to welcome my friend and former colleague Justin Leong. Justin, before I let him introduce himself, Justin is a former CEO, entrepreneur. He also has a comic series called the Fugly Dumpling, and as you can see the background, make sure you go check it out on Instagram. What's up, Justin?
Hey Connor, thanks for having me. Yeah, that's a great intro.
You like that?
Very here.
Well, thanks so much for getting on with me. So, how's everything been? How are you? What you been up to these days?
Yeah, it's going well. I think the last time I think we worked together probably like 3 or 4 years from now. I don't
Yeah,
know.
like
It's probably been a
2016,
while.
2015, right?
Time flies. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's been great since then. Learned a lot of great things working with you, and since then, yeah, I comic strip. I started a side hustle, and I'm just really lucky right in quarantine. I think that's really just the highlight right now. I'm very
Oh
happy
yeah.
to be in a
So
stable place. I think.
what's your COVID story, man? So what happened from like has everything changed for you? Has it had a big impact on what you were doing before COVID? What's your COVID story like?
Yeah. And, Um, COVID has not been as crazy for me, I think, as a lot of other people have been very lucky. I think a lot of it's been the support of a lot of really great family members. So right now, I'm kind of extreme social distancing on a family member's farm right now. So I'm very safe. It's also kind of given me the chance to really focus on work, really
Yeah.
focus on the comic right now, and the digital space is booming. So why not try it out? And yeah, it's just been it's been a really good chance to really self isolate myself from everything and just focus on work. So I'm
Yeah.
very lucky. My health's been good. People in my life, their health's been good too. So no complaints. Just very thankful.
Love that. Um, at least I'm just speaking more for myself. The pandemic has came with a lot of, I guess, kind of surprises with just learning a little bit more about myself, spending a lot more time alone.
Mm.
What's been the biggest surprise for you, if any?
Mm. Biggest surprise for me. Uh, um, I've been very lucky that my job can be done digitally, so I haven't had to deal with a lot of career changes. I think the biggest surprise for me, I think things related to relationships and friends and stuff like that. I've had to learn how to really focus on myself a lot more. Not that I'm cutting people out of my life or anything, but
No, I get it.
I know in yeah, in this time, I just really have to focus on myself, um, and I feel like that's the hugest difference. Just like you said, focusing on yourself and internal reflection and stuff has been the biggest change for me.
Yeah,
Um, yeah.
yeah, yeah. Definitely a lot of time to self-reflect, and at least for me, sometimes I kind of overanalyze myself and critique myself, but it's all to try to be
It's
better,
good.
right? Which is never a bad thing.
Of course.
But for everyone listening, me and Justin met. Justin was the first guy ever on my team when I was going door to door doing residential sales. And Justin was an absolute stud. Came in, helped me really build a team. Came in, did a ton of good work for me. You were only there about like 4 months, right?
Yeah, I did it. I did it over the summer. It was my
Yeah,
last year of college. Yeah, yeah,
yeah. And you're going to school in Canada too, right? At the time.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I remember that. Um,
Mhm.
but at least for me, I took a lot of lessons from that business. What were some things that you felt you learned going door to door?
That job was the best training, and I mean it like heartily that I could have asked for. It's like the I think in a lot of different respects. So in terms of just sales roles in general, after that, I had sales roles that were like cold calling and stuff like that. And that's a totally different skill to develop. And that's great. But um, just the nature that we had to get rejected face to face every day, 300 times a day,
Yeah,
that kind of experience is just incredibly valuable. I think the most important thing I learned from that, that's carried on with everything else in my life, has been a real growth mentality. And what I feel like so many people say, oh, have a growth mentality, for me, I didn't, something clicked in that job for me, in a very real way that I think before, I think everyone loved to say, oh yeah, I love to learn, I love to whatever, right? But in that job, um, I remember thinking, I was like, man, these days are so rough and they can be really rough. We were working hours a day and it was 100% commission. It's really tough. And you're fully responsible for your own income. And I love that. And on the other end of things, there are days I worked 12 hours and I got $0 as a result, right? And it's hard to pick yourself up the next day. But I realized that there's one way to look at it where it's like, very straightforward. I didn't make any money. I worked really hard. That sucks. But then there's another way of thinking about it. Well, I would say there's two other ways of thinking about it. There's the way where you're like, that was hard. I'm going to power through it and I'm going to pick myself up and do it the next day. But then the third way of thinking about it that I've found to be incredibly valuable for me, at least, has been, this is genuinely a good thing. I look at a version of myself that didn't have to go through that. And I'm like, the fact that I did go through that, man, I'm going to be a killer once I'm in a position where, um, the playing fields are level. Right.
Right.
And I think ever since then, I've really seen, wins as wins and then losses as genuine wins if I can learn from them. And I think helps me see a lot of things very positively. And I took that away from that job, and that's, I don't know, I can't thank you and the team enough for putting me through the ringer like that. I was very, very thankful for that.
Yeah, man. And for me too, like I had started 2 months before you got there. And I was like brand new and I got good at it. And then I was like, oh shit, I got this guy on my team and you were a stud. I was like, shoot, I don't want to mess this up. Um, but we built like a pretty good team in a short time. I almost got promoted. Like it was really cool. I actually saw Jeremy a couple of weeks ago. Me and Jeremy are still really close friends. He has a baby on the way. Shout out to Jeremy. But yeah, and but really cool stuff. So you said the one thing that you carried on was kind of, I guess, kind of the student mentality and really taking things with a grain of salt. Is that kind of what you would say?
Yeah, it's just a way of seeing, I think, hardships as good things too. And then in that way, I don't know, it sounds kind of naive, but
No, I
everything.
get what you're saying. It's like there's a yeah, it's like at least for me, and I'm not gonna go into like the religious side of it, but everyone things happen for a reason, right? And you go through things to learn something, and at the end of it all, there's a takeaway from it. And you could either look at it as the negative side of it and be like, oh, I worked so long, I made no money, or like, hey, I worked really hard and I didn't achieve success today, but I'm gonna pull this positive from it and this positive from it and use it to propel myself forward. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah, yeah. It's kind of like the classic control what's within your control. It's
Right.
easy to complain about a situation, but what you can control is how you react to something and how you
Mm-hmm.
go from there. And that sounds so cliche, but I know I didn't know how to really do that properly until I had that job. My mentality approaching
Right.
everything was very, very different after that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So towards the end of that summer, you were telling me about, hey, after this, I'm gonna finish school and I want to create this game, this board game. And I didn't really understand it. And then what? What? I don't know. A couple years later, I see this
Mhm.
thing real. The game was called Russian Roulette.
Mhm.
Where did that idea come from?
That's a good question. So, um, yeah, I always wanted to make a game. Russian roulette came from, I was talking to, I was taking a class in college where we were talking about these behavioral concepts, and I feel like the origin story is kind of boring. It was just like my professor said, like, Russian roulette would be a really fun game if everyone didn't die at the end of it or something. I was like, oh, it's interesting. And then it kind of slowly evolved from there because I was like, all right, let me explore this as a game idea. Um, and just the concept of having ants, but then you being able to control some aspect of it, I think it just catered really well to the concept.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how I came up with it. Um,
Like it. So how does the game work really? I know that's not something you're really doing too much now, but how does it work really? How does the game work?
sure. Basic idea is that each player gets a set of like 3 lives or 3 characters, and 3 characters die, then you lose. That's basically it. And then every turn you pull the trigger or flip a card on the table. It's
Okay.
either a bullet or a blank. It's either safe or dangerous. And
Got it.
those cards are randomized to a certain extent, but each player can control what's in there. So you can, for example, play a bullet thinking that your opponent will get it, and then they'll shoot their character. It's also risky because you might end up shooting yourself.
Got
That's
it.
the basic idea. So
Huh. Okay, that's fun. What about
yeah.
did these characters? Because I remember seeing the characters, and they're all like really different and really cool. I remember the guy with the mustache and like the guy with the hat and stuff like that. Did the characters come from anything specific, or just you kind of made it a Western style?
I remember I wanted each character to have different abilities, so I really wanted to have like a Western theme, but I did cater the characters around like the various abilities that I wanted to do. So, for example, like I remember one of the characters was a quick draw, and the idea was that if he was going to get shot, there was a chance that he could outshoot your opponent and get someone else out. So it was a little of both. In terms of the actual art and the design, that's another area which I was very lucky with my connections. My brother-in-law, he's a graphic designer. He's way more talented than I am, and he was doing a heck of a lot else in his life, but he helped me a ton, and he's the one who designed the characters. So I
Oh,
named
that's
them and designed the concept stuff, but he's the one who actually drew them and came up with the character designs. And so definitely he's been super valuable to me.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So who was the game designed for? I saw a picture of you with like sitting at a school with some kids. Is that what it's designed for kids or?
Yeah, it was originally designed for, I think it was like 8 and up. Really, like
Okay.
anyone can play. I know when I was selling it, kids were playing it as well. A lot of people made it into a drinking game in college and stuff. So,
Fun.
yeah, so it's always.
I like it. So, okay. So you have this idea, the game. Talk me through the process of the idea to the first game sold. Talk me through
Sure.
that a little bit.
Um, I guess should I start with like why I made it? I guess
Yeah,
would
tell
that
it
be
all. I'd love
okay?
to hear
So
all of it.
sure. Um, I think at the beginning, the goal was never to make it like this hugely successful game or anything, and that's good because it wasn't. So, um, but I didn't want it to be like this gangbuster, like oh, you see it everywhere. But I really just wanted to make something. I think that was my short term goal when I was in college. It'd be really cool to have my own thing.
Yeah.
Um, and at the time, I think a lot of people who are graduating from college can relate to this. Like, you kind of need experience to get experience. And as I was graduating, part of the reason I did door to door sales, right? And although it was the thing that I loved like the most, like it's been the most valuable experience I could have asked for. Um, it'd be, pretentious or naive of me to say that I did it on purpose, right? Like I did it because I couldn't really find anything else. Ended
Right.
up being the best job I could imagine. Um, 100% commission was really the only job that would take me. So after that, it was just like, all right, I want to look into like, I feel really good at sales. I really love to learn some kind of technical skills like marketing or something like that.
Right.
But no one would give me a shot, because you need experience to get experience. And
Right.
so really making this was half, fulfilling kind of a childhood dream, but then also being like, look, if no one's going to give me experience, I need to do something very public to put on a resume and get experience as like a
Right.
stepping stone kind of thing. So that was a huge reason why I did it.
Okay.
Now, I guess the entire process was, I had an idea. I thought it was a really solid idea. The concept of the game seemed really straightforward, easily explainable, seemed pretty solid. Um, I beta tested it with a lot of friends. I just like cut out like paper, cards and stuff like that for a while. It was like
Right.
I think I beta tested it for like a year or two or something.
Wow.
Um,
Okay.
After that, I gained a lot of really cool, just like business startup-y e-com experience by having to set up, a web page and then a Kickstarter page and then learning how to fund that and then market it on social media. I wasn't that great at it, but I had to learn a heck of a lot, and it was a great experience.
Yeah.
I when I guess like I had to partner with a lot of manufacturers and shippers and I had to do a lot of legal work with lawyers and stuff like that to get the company like certified and all that and trademarked and all that. And it was all really, really cool. And I was learning this all while just graduating college. It's like, man, this is awesome experience. So that was kind of the lead up to like I guess that was the concept creation and preparation. And then um, preparation phase, it was like, all right, I have my business partners. I need this much money in order to get funded if this is even going to become a thing. I wasn't sure if it'd become a thing, but I knew
Wow.
what I needed
Okay.
to get there. Um,
Mhm.
and then after that, it was like, all right, I'm going to get on Kickstarter because it's a very public thing. Even if it doesn't last, like I'll have this thing online always that I can look back on, even if it's not. Wanted to put my best foot forward, so I launched the Kickstarter, um, and I really just did guerrilla tactics. I used the door-to-door concepts and stuff that we learned together, and messaged literally everyone that I knew, um, and and told them to message everyone that they knew. I joined like hundreds of groups on Facebook and just posted stuff. Half of them blocked me, but the other half let me in. So it's like, let's just do it.
Okay.
And it was funded. So I got the game produced. I ended up shipping them all out by hand, delivered a lot of them by hand.
Yeah.
Um, I made enough to break even and make it, a thing and something I was very proud of. And then that ended up leading into career opportunities down the road. And it was just a really, really, really fun thing in my life that I can look back on really, really fondly about. So
Yeah. I'll tell you, man, I have the utmost respect for you for just like years ago telling me something and putting your ass on the line, working hard, making it a reality. And that was really when I saw that, I was like, man, like he did it. Like he told me he was going to do this and he did it. And it was pretty cool, man. So definitely shout out to you. Um, but another question I guess I have, so you did, I mean, I had to write it all down. You did the promotional videos, the marketing campaign, you did the Kickstarter, like you came with this cool idea, you did everything. What was the hardest part of that for you?
Ooh, that's a good question. Um, Man, I feel like there are two types of hard aspects to it. So the first one is like things that just felt really outside of my control. So things that had to do with technical skills that I just have to be very honest about that I just did not have, right?
Right.
So things like art design and stuff, which my brother-in-law really saved me on, right?
Mm-hmm.
And website design and like coding all of those things and designing the Kickstarter page. Like I I knew kind of what I wanted it to look like, but I really relied on it was actually my girlfriend at the time. She helped me out a lot with that. So there are a lot of people in my life that helped with that aspect. And in that way, that was a hard part because I had to rely on someone else and I'm not
Right.
as used to that.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of actual workload, I would say the fundraising aspect was probably pretty difficult. It was a heck of a lot of fun, but I was working a full-time job in the meantime because I wasn't expecting anything out of this anyways, right?
Right.
Um, so I I would go to work, I'd do my 9 to 6 or whatever, and then I'd get home and then I'd spend 5 hours every night just messaging people. And I remember I even hit like I didn't know there was a cap on how many Facebook messages you could send every day, but apparently there
Did you?
is.
I
But
didn't know that. I
but I
didn't
hit
know
that
that.
like every single day. So that was tough.
What's the number?
I I don't know. It just said like you've hit the cap. So I
That's
actually don't
crazy.
know. I don't know. I don't know if they still do that, but it's probably to protect from spam. I'm sure that's what it is. So
Yeah. That's
yeah.
interesting. Okay. So you created the Russian roulette game in but 2014 is what I wrote down.
Yeah, that's
Does that
probably
sound
right.
about right?
Yeah, so I made it. I started working on it in 2014, beta tested it for like a year or two, and then I think it got funded probably in like 17 or 18 or something like
Okay.
that. Yeah, it's probably something like that. But then, yeah, I think on LinkedIn I put it on 2014 because that's when I started working with like manufacturers and lawyers and stuff, and that's a part of the process, of course. So
Love
yeah,
it. So, okay. So after that, you launched the comic series, which I have in my background, the Fugly Dumpling.
yeah,
Um, can you describe the comic for me?
sure, yeah. It's pretty straightforward. So it's just a comedy comic, so weekly comic series. I think they're just like quick things to. I know it sounds cliche, but I think right now a lot of people need some distractions from everyday life. So the idea is it's supposed to be a very like bite-sized kind of like comedy bit that adds some positivity to people's feeds every week.
Yeah,
So that is,
I
yeah.
love it. No, it makes 100% sense. And I think the world needs more and more of that, which is part of the reason I started this podcast. Um,
Mhm. Yeah.
but okay. So, what is how did this idea come about?
Yeah. So let's see. I kind of get in. I always wanted to make a comic strip since I was a kid. And like I said, quarantine happened. I was very lucky to have a very stable job that, can support me. And uh, I figured I was like, look, there are a lot of things going on in my life as well that just like anyone else in quarantine, there's just like, look, I got to get out of my head. I have to funnel this into something positive.
Mhm.
It originally started as something to just like brighten up my day and brighten up some close friends' days and stuff, and just like do something and work on a skill that I've always wanted to like develop. So it kind of connects to the Russian roulette thing, where the one thing that was outside my control in that process was and the art and all that. And I was just like, man, it'd be great to learn this skill so that if I wanted to do something down the road, I don't know if it'd be the comic or another game or something like that, I can have full control over that as well. I don't have to feel bad about relying on someone else. And I don't
Yeah.
know. So I think a lot of those things came together. And then the real instigator was being in quarantine and being like, look, there seems to be a need right now. I have time. I'm very fortunate that I have the flexibility to pursue something else outside of work. Let's just go for it. And my day job is very like it's digital marketing, basically. So utilizing those skills and practicing those outside of work, it seemed to like really mesh really well. Um, it's evolved into something much larger than anything like Russian roulette was, or a lot larger than I am right now. So now it's gotten to a place where I feel like I feel like it can be something much more sustainable than like a board game and stuff like that. And I'm
Right.
having a ton of fun with it. So that's kind of the TLDR of that.
Yeah. I love the comic series. I have a little cutout for you. I love these.
Oh, Connor. Oh,
Yeah,
that's so
yeah.
nice.
These are cool, man. I see them every week. I've been following it ever since you launched it. I think you have like almost 21,000 people follow your Instagram. It's pretty.
Yeah, that's right.
It's a pretty cool freaking accomplishment, Justin. I think it's really cool. What are your goals with the Fugly Dumpling? What do you want to do with it?
I think I think just like Russian roulette, I have an end goal in mind to keep. I think that's important anytime I do a project. I know like kind of where to stop and when not, where to go. Like my end goal for this one is just to make comics for as long as I can. I'd love to just it's added so much positivity into my life. Just me personally, I thrive off of just a project that I can keep working on, and this is an unending project. So
Right.
I'd love to keep just making comics, but in order to get that goal, I realize that realistically, I probably will need to make some kind of secondary income off of it to justify the amount of time I put into it, and I need to get
Sure.
better at it. So given that that's the end goal, I do have like a 5-year plan because it's fine to it's good to have a plan even if you can't hit it, but I have a plan and I'm hoping I can work towards it. So the first step is to just grow the audience, not ask anything in return, just have a good time and hopefully touch a lot of people in a good way. um, and then in the meantime, I just genuinely need to get better because right now each comic that I release probably takes upwards of like 15 to 20 hours.
Oh wow.
But like
Okay.
people don't think about that, but like it takes a long time. But part of it's because I'm just not good at it yet, right?
Sure.
It takes a lot of work. And so for the next year or two, I'm going to be just working on my skills, working on just knowing how to do this better,
Yeah.
getting more efficient. Then after that, there's digital monetization, just very comic related things, So I've been tapped by people to make digital stickers so that people like can share on like Facebook, Instagram, like reactions, emojis, and stuff like that.
Hmm.
Be cool if there was a Fugly Dumpling like sticker pack.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. It'd be cool
so
if there
stuff
was an
like
emoji too, or something
yeah,
like that. Yeah.
it's like stuff like that. And then there's certain comic sites that will sponsor you to show if you're popular enough. I'm not there yet, so that's a goal, obviously. Um, and then after digital monetization, there's a lot of physical monetization. So it'd be amazing if there's like a Fugly Dumpling plushie one day, or like a
That'd be
comic book or
sick.
something.
Yeah.
But all those are so far in the future. I mean, I've thought about them obviously, but that would be the end goal. But who
Yeah.
knows? Who knows what's going to happen in the next couple of years if
That's
life
awesome.
changes? So we'll
If you
see.
get a plushie, I definitely want one.
Yeah, you got it, Connor.
I got my first plushie. It was actually from someone on my team, but then I got the little octopus one that's like happy and then sad. I keep it right by
Oh,
my desk during the day to keep me in the positive mindset. Um, but that's actually was it wasn't a question I wrote down, but listening to you talk this entire interview, just your energy is so positive, and like even when you tell me these stories, it's like that positive mindset really from the time I met you to now, it's never really changed. How do you keep that positive mindset, especially with, I'm sure like you had hardships with the comic series. I'm sure you had hardships in your personal life with this pandemic and everything. Like, how do you keep this positive mindset?
Oh, that's a very positive question, Connor. I like it. Um, yeah, I think I do deal with a lot of negativity and I don't let it out a lot. But I don't just push it under the rug or brush it under the bed. I think a lot of it does come back to that concept of realizing, rather than comparing to someone else, if I compare myself to another version of myself that didn't have to go through that hardship, I know that I'm a lot stronger as a result. And it sounds so cliche, but the whole aspect about you saying that you're very self-reflective, right? And I think the most successful people or the most happy people are very self-reflective, because you can't change when negative things happen to you, but
Right.
you can choose to learn from them and genuinely see them as positive things. So I don't know, it's hard to put a finger on it, but I just know that when I look back on the things that I've lost and the things that I had to go through, and things I have to deal with, that I'm just genuinely very thankful for all of them. And you know, a lot of I could have a breaking point at any point, but at this time, like I feel yeah, happy and just very thankful for a lot of things that have come from all of it. So yeah.
That's awesome. Now I don't know if we've had this conversation, but it's funny. So my podcast is called Door to Door to the Top Floor, and just to explain it to you, the reason why is the concept of my podcast in my eyes is everyone starts at a place, right? Whether you're born into wealth or you're not, or you don't have experience or whatever it is, but you start at kind of a base point, and obviously everyone wants to grow and be successful in their life and climb their way up. So my mindset where I kind of started was like really like going door to door, like literally, right? And the goal is to climb my way up and get to the quote unquote the top floor, which is kind of what success is to me, and whatever that means. But my question for you is, what does the top floor look like for Justin?
Like what does success mean for me?
Mm-hmm.
That's a good question. Um, I feel like my definition of success is just making sure that every minute of every day I don't regret what I'm doing, and that I'm working towards something that means something to me. Um, I think to a certain extent, like people say money doesn't buy happiness and everything, but I think being in a stable place, and having enough flexibility to do what you love requires a certain level of financial stability.
Agreed.
So if I'm being very practical, so I've never really needed a lot of money. I've never been very materialistic. I wear like the same clothes every single day, you know.
Right.
But making sure that I can pay my bills and making sure that I have time in the day to do stuff that I really love. And right now I love my job. I love the comic work. I feel very happy right now. So that's kind of what I define as success. And
Yeah.
yeah. So,
And everything's so subjective, and I think that's where like social media and all these things like they mess it up. Like
sure.
people get in their heads about where they're supposed to be, and I do it too, and I think we all do.
We all do.
But um, something that I keep repeating to myself is I have a friend David who he's an actor. He does music, all these things. But he always tells me when I talk about my podcast and I compare it to all these like Joe Rogans and like really successful podcasts. He's like, dude, like quality is subjective.
Mm.
It's very subjective because yeah, sure, if you compare yourself to Joe Rogan, who's made $100 million from Spotify to do a podcast, sure,
Yeah.
yeah, you're not that good. But like when you compare it to other people in your peers and you like look around, you're like, man, like Connor's doing something cool or Justin's doing something really cool. Like when I saw you as your peer, I was like, Justin, he did it. Like he's doing all these cool things. It's really, really cool. And when and with that said, you could be, and thankfully you're not, but you could also be like, fuck, it's not very, I'm not achieving a lot of success here. I'm not getting this, but it's like, no, man, quality is subjective, and I think a lot of people struggle with that for whatever reason.
Mm.
But another question I have for you. So you've been doing well with these two. With you did well with Rushin Roulette. You got out of it what you wanted, and now you're pursuing this. Everything with this comic series. But if you were to rewind, what is something I guess you wish you would have knew before you kind of started that adventure?
Hmm. That's a good question. Um, I don't know that I would have done anything differently, and I know that's a very strong statement. Like it sounds very easy to make, but like I'm very happy with how things turned out. But
Sure.
um, I do think one of the things that I learned that I didn't know about before um, was that whole aspect of like when you lose things, that is actually a good thing if you can learn from it. Um, I remember with my I remember when I was in college, I did not really apply myself the way I should have. I did not. I wasn't the bottom of my class, but I wasn't very good. You know, um, I also didn't know how to interview very well. I wasn't. I really didn't have any prospects. And uh, I remember I got an internship interview for actually my current job right now. And I thought, man, that would be amazing if I got that internship. And it's so easy, especially in that time of your life where like, this is my big break. This is my opportunity. Um, and I didn't get it. I screwed up the interview. And I remember thinking like very binarily, that was a bad thing to happen. And then what ended up happening is because I didn't get that, I got the door-to-door job. I was forced into it, and I learned a crazy amount. And now I'm in the full-time role for that job.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember sitting on the curbside and door to door, being like, if I just get on a level playing field, just give me a shot. I know as a result of everything that I'm going through right now, I'm gonna kill it. And I didn't have that kind of perspective early on, but now looking back, I'm like, man, I'm so thankful because the version of me that got that internship and got the easy way into the exact same role right now would not be doing half as
Mm-hmm.
well.
Yeah.
So that's
Yeah.
something. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great way to look at it. And like that applies to so many different things. I mean, even if you look at like athletes, like a lot of the ones that came from nothing are like the ones that just they look back and everything that they went through. It's like this is the reason why I'm gonna make this, and I worked too hard. I remember one of the managers in that business always used to tell me, Connor, you didn't come this far to come this far, right? It's like keep pushing, keep going, because you never know what's gonna happen. But I think you're doing an amazing job, and I'm a huge fan of yours. But I think question I have, and this is for me as a pretty new in this content creating space. Like I'm kind of where you were years ago, and I'm still like figuring this out, and like I don't know why I'm doing it, but I just like doing it. But
Mhm.
what are some resources that you use to kind of learn along the way? You know, you mentioned you weren't super good at marketing, you're super good at this, and that. What were some kind of things, not specific people, but resources, whether online or ways to learn? Like, how did you learn and fill those gaps?
Mhm. It's a good question. It's harder to kind of relate it to kind of a podcast because mine isn't a podcast. And I
Right.
will say that a lot of the growth that I've seen, to be frank, is very comics focused. So,
Okay.
for example, knowing who to reach out to and like doing a lot of research on, there's a lot of like accounts that just share comics for, literally made for people to find new comics, and these guys have hundreds of thousands of followers, that, you know, like massive accounts. And so just messaging them over and over and over again, getting them to share my stuff, that's something that's like, you know, I guess it's so comic focused, you know.
Right.
um I think one thing that um, I think one marketing concept that I didn't know about when I was doing Russian Roulette that I know about like now, and there's a reason why Russian Roulette, yes, it did what I wanted it to, but it didn't blow up nearly as quickly as say the comic has. And I think one of the core concepts is that I think it's just the realization that time is money. And that sounds, again, very cliche. But what I mean by that is my day job is working on people's like Google Ads accounts, right? And learning how to grow their businesses via digital marketing platforms. And what I've realized from that, I'm just like, man, you could someone when I was doing Russian roulette, I would work for 5 hours after every work day to get in front of maybe 200 more people in a very real way. You know, it's like door to door sales. Like I get in front of them in a more personal way. But then when I see the impact that digital marketing as a resource can provide in my day job right now, I'm like, man, for like $30, you could get in front of like tens of thousands of people. And if you're good at it, then you can get in front of really relevant people. In reality, $30, when I think about like the actual time that goes into earning that much, right? You know, it can be an hour, it can be 2 hours, depending on your job. But like, would I rather work 5 hours and get in front of a couple hundred people, or would I rather, there's a lot of, I think there's a lot of just stereotypes around advertising and going about all these different methods that get in the way of just what's logical. I do both, and it's not that like I'm dumping money into advertising, but it's just like thinking about all the different avenues and being very cognizant of how you're using your time. I think is something that I didn't know about before. It sounds obvious, but I think the best advice is obvious. So,
Hmm.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Um, and you mentioned you had a lot of, at least I know you mentioned your brother-in-law. He was a really, he really jumped in and helped you with Russian roulette. But I'm sure there's been, a couple of specific people that have helped you with both of these series that were really influential for you. Who are, let's say your top three people that have been really influential to your success with these two things?
It's a good question. Um, Definitely, if we're talking about Russian roulette, it's my brother-in-law because it wouldn't have happened without him. Um, my girlfriend at the time was hugely helpful to me as well. So I kind of put in a lot of grind into those, but in terms of technical skills and actual execution, like it would not have happened without those two people. Um, for for the Fugly Dumpling, I'll I'll be totally honest, it's kind of just been a brainchild of myself. And so, and part of it's because I've been in quarantine. So I really haven't
Yeah.
interacted or leaned on anyone. So
Right.
not to say, oh, I did it on my own. It's kind of, I had to. I didn't really have anyone to like ask for advice. Um, I don't know. I feel like just a lot of people in my day job really influence me and really make me feel like, you know, it's not so outside of the norm to be very ambitious and start up something new like this podcast and stuff like that, you know.
Right.
So um I feel like I would accredit a lot of just that culture and just being in that kind of group of people to influencing me to just get off my ass and start something, right?
Yeah.
So um that's yeah, I
That makes sense.
yeah, yeah. It's hard to answer that one.
No, it's a good. I'm keep hitting you with these good questions,
Yeah, yeah.
huh? um, Okay, well, I only have a few more, and then that'll probably wrap it up. But a good question that I want to ask you is, what advice would you give someone that is trying to do that? Maybe they want to pursue something similar to the comic series. Like, what advice would you give them?
I would say have a game plan before you do it. I think a lot of people, well, it depends on, well, know what you want to get out of it. So I think one thing I've been saying this whole time is when I did Russian Roulette and when I did the Fugly Dumpling, I knew kind of what I wanted out of it first. And if I exceed it, great. But at least like I know what I want initially. It sounds super obvious, but I think a lot of people will just do something because it's fun and they'll just do it. And then they'll wonder year, 2 years down the road, why isn't this successful? Well, if your goal was for it to be success, if your goal was just to have fun with it, then you're successful. In my mind, you did it. You did a good
Right.
job. You made something that another version of yourself wouldn't have made, and that's something that should be respected. But I would say have at least a rough goal before you start, because it's also that whole aspect of, oh, I'm in high school and I have this passion and stuff and I really want to pursue it. It's like, why should I go to college, and that kind of stuff. Well, it's like, okay, if you know your game plan before you go to college, like, are you going to use those 4 years to develop your skills and develop a following or something? And you're going to make this into a career. Okay, how are you going to monetize? How are you going to make a living off of it? If you can't do that, are you okay with not making money off it? Because that's totally respectable as well, too. But it's
Yeah.
just a matter of know what you're going to be doing before you really get into it, because then you might end up wasting your time, right? And know what your goals are. That's something that I've learned, at least from my experience. I don't know. That's super super important.
Yeah.
That's what I would say. Yeah.
Man, that was a powerful message. Well, thanks for answering that. I appreciate that. Yeah, I think, and even for me too. I think I need to define it a little bit more with what I want. I think for me, the hardship, and this is me just spitballing before we end here, is I think the hardship for me is like, well, number one, at first I was doing episodes by myself, and like I wasn't doing interviews like this. This is way easier for any podcaster out there. Interviewing is so much easier because you don't have to come up with original content.
Sure.
Because before, and the reason why I started this podcast originally was when we were going door to door, right? Jeremy, the boss, would sit up and say some motivational little speech. And we'd
Yeah.
all go out and be like, hoorah, and go try to kick ass. And eventually, as I got promoted, I was doing those speeches. And I loved that feeling, the feeling of like giving some sort of message or value to a group of people and then like having it positively affect them. So I started the podcast, didn't really know what I wanted. And now, like, yeah, ideas of like how to monetize it. I'm not really like, I'm still figuring it out. A game plan. I don't know if I necessarily have that. Um, I know I want to reach more people and give back this positivity, but I think like I enrolled in this podcast training. I'm going to take it, but stuff like that. But I guess like, what advice would you have for me, who's still kind of like, I'm still trying to figure it out. I'm not really sure what I want yet. Like, would you recommend that I maybe sit down, I write a game plan or what I want out of it? Like, what advice would you give me? Just hearing a little bit about where I'm at.
I think one fair disclaimer though is that I'm still figuring stuff out for myself too.
Yeah,
So
we all are, man.
yeah,
We
take
all are.
whatever advice I have with a grain of salt, knowing that I'm
Sure.
still figuring stuff out. My perspective is yes, definitely plot out a game plan, because that can never hurt, right? I think a lot of people avoid doing it because it can be scary not to have a game plan, and it can
Yeah.
be, I don't think it can just be subtly scary to write it down and realize, oh shoot, I don't have it all figured out. That's the only way that you're really going to figure it out, right? So again, that sounds obvious, but I think the best advice is obvious, right? And so when I say write a game plan out, it's okay when you first start to not know where you want to take things. I know when I started the comic, which is still, it hasn't even been a year. So like it's still so recent.
Brand
So I
new.
still don't know exactly where I want to go.
Sure.
But when I first started, I just wanted to have fun with it. So I'm not saying I had a game plan at that point, but as soon as I realized what it could be and what I wanted it to be, immediately I wrote a game plan down. And I'm like, so for example, if you're thinking, hey, I want to reach a larger audience, or if you learn and in your trainings that you're about to go through, like, hey, these are how people monetize podcasts or whatever, right?
Right.
I would just write down what your monetization goals are and then figure out how much time it would realistically take you to get there. And then you're going to figure out, all right, strategically, what routes are going to help me get there. So, for example, for my comic, when I'm saying I'd love physical monetization, I'm purposely not promoting, like, I'm not trying to work with people trying to like make dumpling plushes yet or anything, right? Because I know that in the long run, that's going to stifle my audience growth because people aren't going to follow as much if I just start promoting things left and right, right? I'm also not good enough at digital art to make these things fast enough, and I know that foundationally, if I want to do any kind of monetization, I need to be able to focus on just audience growth first, right? And I need that to be self-sustaining. I need enough people to be involved so that they can share it out. And I don't need to do what I'm currently doing, which is like joining like 100 different groups and like sharing the comics and stuff. Like, it's just too much time commitment. So having the game plan to know that's the first place I need to attack. And then once I have an audience, then monetize slowly and slowly, right?
Got it. Okay.
Um, and yeah, it's really just figuring out where your time is best put, right? Because there's like 5 different places I could be posting the comics, but I'm purposely not doing it because I know when the right time to go, or at least in my mind, I know when I want to go out there because
Yeah.
I'm just one dude, I don't have the bandwidth. And part of it's also being realistic with myself about like, look, I don't have the time to do everything I want to because I work a
Yeah.
full-time job. Is
Mhm.
my full-time job, something that I need to consider leaving in order to do this? And I'm like, no, it's not, because that's way more secure and it's funding a lot of my work with the comics as well. So
Right.
just having those kind of conversations and having a game plan, that would be the most important thing if you haven't done that yet. That'd be
I haven't. I haven't. So, okay, so when I'm writing this game plan, what are the things that I need to make sure that I answer?
So, what's your end goal? What would you like? And then how are you going to figure out how to hit that end goal? So, doing research on podcasts. It sounds like you're already doing that. You're signing up for trainings and stuff, whether it was for the intention of hitting that goal or not. Like, you're already on the path to like learning that.
Sure.
Um, find out what that looks like, what kind of like payoff that kind of goal would end up being, rather than just like, you know, is it just going to be a personal success for me, which is totally fine if that's enough for you, right? But if you also want to know, okay, if I want to do this as a career instead of like a job, like how much monetization can I expect in the ideal situation, right? Okay, is that enough for me or whatever, right? So part of it's like, is your goal even worth all the work that you're going to put into it? You want to
Right.
figure that out,
Sure.
right? So plot out what the end game would look like in an ideal situation. Educate yourself, because I've tried to educate myself about how what that can look like, right? Because you
Mhm.
need to know what you're getting into. And then it kind of all just like backs out from there. You just need to figure out, okay, because you'll know the podcast space way better than I do, right? So you'll know the skills you need to develop, and then just realistically plot out how long will it take me to learn these skills if I really hustle. How many days in the week do I actually, or how many hours in the week do I actually have to be able to dedicate to this? Because realistically, you want a social life, you have a full-time job outside of this, right?
Right.
So based on that, how long is it going to take you? Because when I said I have a 5-year plan, it's literally because I know I just don't have the bandwidth to like do everything I want to in like 2 years. Like, it's going to take a really long time. And who even knows when quarantine ends and I have a commute and stuff, so
Yeah.
it's really get very, very detailed. So your goals, what that will look like if you achieve them, and then really just what are all the various things you need to learn do in order to get there. Right. Um, and then it becomes a very like straightforward process. Accomplish this, and then you get to the goal, right? But that's hard to plot out. It's hard to know all those things.
Yeah.
um, so
I love that. I'm gonna have to re-listen to this and
oh,
and
okay, cool.
do that. But yeah, that's super helpful. And I think I guess I never have really sitting down and like defined it because I guess I've been just trying to like just promote it and like throw it out there and interact with people and doing that. But it's like you gotta. You're right though when you said you could go a year from now and be like, wait, why isn't this? And then you're like, oh well, I never defined it. I never decided what I want this to be. But super helpful. So thank you for that advice. But that was pretty much it today, Justin. Thank you so much for all the wisdom.
Oh,
Um, I really appreciate it. And dude, I haven't seen you in years. When everything is safe, we'll have to get together and get some lunch or something like that. But for everyone who's interested in the Fugly Dumpling and wants to connect with you, where can we connect with you?
yeah. The comic is on Instagram primarily. It's at the Fugly Dumpling, all one word. You can check that out. Yeah. It's also, I think if you just Google it, you'll find it. If you don't have an Instagram, then you can
I did.
follow it
That's where I got
on.
this picture.
If you can, if you Google it, then you'll see it's on Webtoons and Tapas. They're smaller comic sites. Those are where you can subscribe if you don't have an Instagram, or if you just want to support there. Yeah,
Yeah.
but that's really it. So
Awesome. Well, Justin, thank you so much for getting on with me today. Everyone, make sure you go follow at the Fugly Dumpling. If my big ass will get out of the way. But again, everyone, thank you so much for listening. Have an awesome week. Next week, I'll be sitting down with Will Z. Tidwell, an entrepreneur out in Arkansas, who I interacted with networking online. Pretty cool. It's crazy how the world works like that. But thank you, and I'll see you next week.